So if you're here, you have an interest in learning something new. This is a topic that for many, most probably never heard of anything like this. If you're outside of the kinds of circles that this would be in. And a good reason for that is many of the people who fall into these categories tend to be very secretive about it. And the reason is because they fear rejection from society, either from their own family or their friends. So they hide it. They pretend to be just a normal person like everybody else. So it's relatively rare to get anyone to talk to you about this or to open up about it, because really you're not going to know, say that someone is an Otherkin or a Therian by looking at them. So you won't know who to ask about it, and unless they really trust you, they tend not to open up about it. Now there are some exceptions. I would be one of them, because some people, like myself, don't care. So the reason I use the term otherkin so much versus some of the other terms, which are getting into more specifics because it does break down into different types, is that otherkin, at least from the research I can do on the topic, seems to be more all encompassing. It's like saying animal instead of saying horse. Horse applies to a type of animal. Animal just applies to all of them. So otherkin applies to the various types. And then, of course, you have Therians and you have Mythkin. But for the purpose of this, I'm mostly going to be just using Otherkin. So, I guess part one is exactly what is an Otherkin. Now, this is something that's going to have slightly different meanings for different people, because there's different. Everyone who is one experiences it differently. And some people are very shy about it, and some people are not. So different people are going to have different experiences. And then some people, depending on where you live, may have friends who are relatively accepting of you for it. Some people may not. Some people may not know if they have friends who are accepting of it because they're too afraid to speak to their friends about it. So, in a nutshell, what it basically boils down to is, first, an assumption, or the idea that you have a soul or a spirit of some sort, and not only do humans have it, but a belief that various other animals also have it. So right there, you run into the first little hiccup with much of society, and that is human society has long been built up to exploit animals. And part of the excuse for it, like the idea of why it's okay to enslave a horse, but it's not okay to enslave, say, a man, is the horse is inferior. Well, then you have to come up with reasons why the horse is inferior. And you can't quite just simply do like intelligence or the ability to make things, because then you can very quickly, once you start drawing those kind of lines, you very quickly get to where you can have you can argue your way right into having human slavery. And actually, that's exactly what they did with the African slaves in the Americas. Was a and with slaves generally throughout history has been this general idea that the people who are doing the enslaving are superior in some way to the people being enslaved. So with animals, the way it tends to work is this idea that humans are somehow special. They have a special type of soul, or they have a soul at all. And animals are just kind of like these autonomous biological machines that just roam around, just do all these things by mere instinct, and that's the end of that. And then, so the animals don't have emotions, they don't have feelings, they don't have desires and wants and dreams, which is just not true. But when you get to the idea of animals having souls, and then therefore an animal's soul might not be in the right body, now you get to something that challenges that idea of human superiority and the idea that it's okay to do X to this animal because you're superior to that animal. I personally would argue that goes the other way around. If you're the superior being, then it's kind of behooved of you to care for the inferior being rather than exploit them. So, once you get past the animal has a soul, the next part of Otherkin is many times involves the idea of reincarnation. Now, it may or may not include reincarnation. You could have someone, for instance, who is a horse's soul, who has been born for the first time, but has been born either by accident or by design into the wrong body. For instance, into a human's body. You also may have someone who has been a horse in a past life and has reincarnated, and now in this life they are a human. And particularly for those who have lived multiple lives, say as a horse, they will identify more as a horse than they will as a human. For some, it doesn't matter. And the last type is the ones, this is the type that really applies to me, and why I'm not sure entirely if I would consider myself to be an otherkin or not, because in some instances, it didn't involve you dying and then being reborn. Instead, it's more akin to temporarily leaving your body in like something of an out-of-body experience and entering into another body. And in my case, for instance, this is a temporary condition. So where once you're done in the body that you're currently in, you return to your original body. I hate to use references from pop culture to try and explain it, but a good explanation of it would be, a way to visualize it would be if you've ever seen the movie Avatar. Now, in the movie Avatar, the person would go into this machine, and it would basically make their normal body unconscious and put their consciousness into this body that they now control that's not their body. Now, in the movie, obviously, they could come in and out of it almost at will. From the best I could tell, someone on the other side could simply pull them back out almost pretty much at whenever you wanted to. So if you could now imagine, for my situation, being something like that, but where you can't be pulled back out until the body that you've gone into expires. So it's a one and done. There's no going back and forth. That would be kind of cool if I could switch back and forth like that. It would definitely save money and fuel if I could just simply switch and fly to work and then fly back, and at least I wouldn't have to sit in traffic anymore. So those are the three basic concepts. Now, the next part is, with being otherkin, you feel very alien, or you feel like you're in an alien body or an alien society, because human society is set up around, humans. And because of that, it's set up around the human way of thinking and the human instincts. And it's not really designed around other species, understandably, because it is a human society. And this leaves many people who are otherkin to be to feel like they're in an alien environment. And making it worse, you're in an alien body. So you may be a little bit more clumsy than normal because you're trying to move things in a different way than what you are used to moving. For instance, walking on two legs is somewhat alien to a good number of animal species. Um, Sometimes, for instance, even speech can be a little bit difficult. Even for those who fully master speech, it can still be somewhat difficult because you're not used to always communicating via speech. You're many times used to communicating really through thought, um, through telepathy towards others of your own species, and you can hear each other's thoughts. And that many times, which is a problem I've run into many times, where you'll think something to somebody and not actually say anything. And you're used to that actually conveying what your intention is. While for humans who are typically not in tune to something like that, not really very good at anything like that, you ended up not conveying anything at all. An example from my personal life that I do a lot is I will apologize to someone for, say, bumping into them telepathically, through thinking that intention to them of I'm sorry, but never actually vocalizing the I'm sorry part. So they actually never get the full message the way some other animals that I hang out with do. So you get a little bit of the communication error part. The other part is many times for Otherkin, your base animal instincts for your animal are still present. Many times are suppressed, usually intentionally on your own part, but they're still there. And a lot of these examples I'm going to give are equine based because since I am a winged horse, my experience with them are equine based instincts. And so one of the big ones that equine therians have is the bolt response. Horses are somewhat famous for we tend to run from everything. And we tend to run from stuff that you don't really have to run from. So like that plastic bag that suddenly comes out of nowhere and next thing you know, you're just running. You didn't even think about it. That's the thing with bolting. You didn't think about what startled you. You're not really thinking about where you're going. Now, at some point after you start running, you'll start figuring out where you're going to go to. But the first part, for those first few seconds of running, it's just simply you started running. And me personally, I've experienced a few instances where my equine side decided, okay, we're going to bolt now. And just before, like my soul, I could feel my soul already out the door, across the parking lot, and across the 4-lane highway. Before my body started moving, and then I could feel the other half of me, the human half, kind of pull back on the reins a little bit there and go, hold on. Let's take a second look at this thing here. And one example of that I can think of was when I was going to UTI, I went to open the door to leave the building during one of the breaks. And a piece of insulation, a foam door insulation, kind of hung down. And in my equine mind, that was a snake. And I was gone. And just like I just described before, the whole bolting across the parking lot, that's exactly where that came from. Was snake came down, I'm gone. And luckily before I could go embarrass myself and be bolting across the parking lot, my human side kind of pulled it back and went, let's take a second look at this, but before we go bolting through this door. And I was like, oh, that was just a piece of rubber. We don't have to go running because of a piece of rubber. And the funny thing was, even if it had been a snake, it would have been a very small snake and not something you would have had to actually run for. But that's not how the equine mind works. It doesn't go, well, let me look at this and see what it is, because and there's a good reason for that. If you delay, if in the event that you have to bolt, and actually have to run away from a threat. You don't have time to think about what that threat is that you're running from. Because if you take that split second to think about it, you're already dead. That's why horses bolt so readily from things that are new. Um, and that's something that on many occasions I'll find myself having to pull myself back from wanting to bolt. And the funny thing is I do that so well that typically no one even sees me flinch at, even sudden gunshots, for instance. Now, continuing, on with that idea of the various instincts, the next, really moving on from it, I think. So the next part I'm going to touch on a little bit more, which is kind of going back to, is this idea of feeling like you're in an alien body. And for someone like me, for instance, I view the human body as something along the lines of like a worm with legs. I'm not very fond of the human form. To me, all of you looked like you went up to a brick wall and smashed your faces against it until you pushed your muzzle back in, and then fell into a vat of acid and lost all of your fur. So that's what humans look like to me. So now, for me, what this entire experience is like going into an alien body on an alien world where the aliens on that world have access to my own people and both work them to death, enslave them, and kill them. So it's a somewhat traumatic experience, putting it lightly. Now, because of this can be damaging to the psyche of a lot of people who experience, being in the wrong body like this. And, not everyone is pretty much a walking, talking Terminator like myself, where they'll just keep, pushing on. And actually, for me, a lot of people, this is a little side rant here, people who are suicidal to me are, because to me, suicide is admitting defeat, and I absolutely detest defeat. So I simply just keep going and going and going. Now, that being said, I can easily see whereas someone who doesn't have that same mentality is going to be damaged significantly from this. And because of this, it is not uncommon for people who are otherkin to either attempt, be, or successfully commit suicide. And if you think about it, it actually kind of makes sense. If what your belief is that, one, you'll reincarnate anyway, and then two, you're hoping that what you reincarnate as is closer to what you actually are, rather than this miserable existence as a human, then why would you stay as human? Now, for some people like myself, you have a reason for being here. There's actually a point to this. And I think for many who don't think that they have a reason for being here, I think what is, they just simply haven't found it yet, which is unfortunate. But like for instance, in my case, I'm not leaving till I'm good and ready, and I'm not good and ready till I'm done here. But that is a dynamic that many have to face, and to get an idea of kind of like what can cause you to have those kind of feelings is for myself, for instance, when I've gone walking, where I live, there's a lot of rolling hills. So I might be standing at the top of one hill, and a couple miles away is the top of the hill I'm going to be walking down the hill and then back up the hill to get to the top of the next hill. Now, for the last 5,000 years or so, if I wanted to get to that top of that second hill, I'm not walking to the top of that second hill. I'm simply going to take off, fly over there, and land. It took very little effort on my part, relatively speaking, and got me there pretty damn quick. And I got to avoid most of the dangers on the ground that would have had me bolting off in random directions. So now in this body, I'll be standing on top of the first hill, be looking at the second hill, and then be like, in subconscious in the back of my head, we'll just fly over, and then still back in subconscious, it hasn't fully gotten out to my main area of thought. I go, wait, why can't I just fly over there? And then it finally hits into fully conscious part where now I'm really paying attention to this, because now it's like the first part where you go to, it's like if you tried to walk and you lost your legs, so you can't walk, but your first instinct is to try and walk over to, say, the fridge, and then like you realize that you can't walk, and now you're consciously thinking about the fact that you can't walk, and you're like, wait, why can't I walk? Oh yeah, I don't have legs. I run into that kind of problem a lot, except for instead of it's, oh, I don't have legs, it's, oh, I don't have wings, so I can't fly over there. And once you get to that part, it's very easy to then get to the depressed part of you miss flying. And if you've ever flown with your own wings, it's something you don't want to readily give up. There's a certain sense of freedom that you get that even humans manage to simulate the concept with their machines, like helicopters and airplanes. But there's a certain sense of freedom that you only get from the I'm going to fly right this exact second because I feel like it. And I'm not going to fly an hour from now after I prep my machine to take off and fly. It's, oh, I'm just going right now. And you almost don't even think about it, because the amount of effort you put into figuring out how you're going to go fly once you know how to fly is about similar to that of I'm going to walk over there. And actually, once you get to gliding, it's even less effort, because you can sleep and glide. It's really not that difficult, especially from if you're on high altitude, you don't have to worry about running into nothing. You just glide along. So in that same area, the next part that you run into is the phantom limb syndrome. And this is something that many times Otherkin will experience to varying degrees and to varying levels of frequency. So you have ones who either feel their limbs as differently than what they currently are, or you will have ones who feel limbs that are no longer there. Now, the first and most obvious one is feeling, for instance, like your tail. And for many, they will, in their mind, they can feel their tail moving. They can feel their thought to move their tail. But in reality, there is no tail there left to move. What humans have for a tail, is this tiny little fully inside their body, hidden inside them tail that does nothing. So the next very common one is, for instance, your ears. Humans have this weird setup where they use an almost entirely digital audio receiving system. So whereas most other animals, and I guess this is one of the advantages of when your brain is bigger than what you probably need, is you can waste brain space, running calculations like this. So for many animals, what you end up doing is you swivel around your ears till when you hear something, and you start swiveling your ear closer to the sound until the sound gets as loud as it gets whatsoever, and that gives you the direction of that sound, and then you use both ears to figure out exactly how far away it is, and all that good stuff. Well, with humans don't move their ears around. Instead, their minds are capable of figuring it all out without having to move their hardware around whatsoever. But for those of us who came here from species who had relatively large movable ears, like for instance dogs and horses and deer and a whole slew of other animals, you will on like the sides of your head, you're going to feel your original ears, and you'll feel them move either subconsciously, like they many times would normally be doing, and consciously when you would consciously want to move your ear somewhere. And then you also have limbs that are completely non-existent on humans. And an example of that would be myself, where I'm a winged horse. So I have a third set of main limbs, which would be my wings. So I will feel my wings. I can feel them open. I can feel them close. I can feel their weight and whatnot on my back. And well, connect a little bit more to your sides rather than straight up to your back. The way um, the back of an equine is shaped and the way the back of a human is shaped is a little bit different. So it's a little bit difficult to explain exactly where I feel them at on the human on my body, but they're more closer to the side. So anyway, you'll feel them, and then the next thing that ends up happening from this, and it's especially as true for larger animals, is you will feel, or you will not so much feel it, you'll be subconsciously leaving clearance for parts of your body that are no longer there. For instance, for horses, it's not uncommon for a otherkin to, when they turn around, particularly if they're in a tighter environment, turning around in such a way that if the rest of their body had been back there, it's not going to hit something. And you also have, for instance, for me, I tend to feel claustrophobic in any place that's smaller than where I could actually open my wings and fly. So my wings being somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 feet across, and give or take, because I've never actually gotten to take a measuring stick to them, but you can get an idea of how big of an area I need to be in before I stop feeling claustrophobic. And it doesn't matter the fact that I can't actually fly; it's still in the back of my head. The consideration of, can I fly? From this location. And actually, believe it or not, for someone like me, I actually quite feel at home having low slung clouds above the ground, because when you have those nice low slung clouds, you have cover that you can fly into once you take off, which is quite useful if you have to run away from something else that flies. It's not as fun trying to get away if they have a clear line of sight to you. So those, I think I'm gonna leave it at that for now. I'm gonna have more parts to go into more detail, but for now, that just gives you a general overview of what it's like being otherkin, at least from the perspective of a winged horse, mostly, because I can mostly give from my personal experience, and gives you an idea of why sometimes we do the things that we do, how we do them.